much for being here. You have the floor. I have the floor. I can stand.
Yeah.
I don't very often find myself on a stage. It makes me feel a little strange. Usually I'm in a circle, in a ceremonial type environment. I am Scott-Irish. A sizable branch of my family tree is Cherokee, and I've walked that way most of my life. Robert I've known for many, many years. I used to repair his driveway. He had me doing a lot of grunt work over there in his place. I keep a lot of stories from my people, the Cherokee, and also from other nations, as I've had many, many teachers. And Robert asked me to bring some stories about ginseng, and actually, without cheating and going on the internet and finding something, I actually only know of one that has been told to me by my grandpa, Cherokee grandpa. And that was one that you probably know, since you are in the business. You probably know of this one. It's told many times in these mountains here. And it's about the Cherokee women and the children that would go to harvest the ginseng. The Cherokee called the ginseng, I believe it was Yunwi Usti, which means the little man. It's called the little man because of the way the roots quite often look, you know. When they harvested the ginseng, the women were careful to step over the first 3 plants that they came to. They would harvest only the 4th one. And before they dug that 4th one, there was always a little prayer. Maybe it was silent, but there was always a little prayer before they took that 4th ginseng. And then they would put a bead, or at least a lock of hair or something they would leave in that place where they harvested the ginseng. It was a show of respect by leaving some behind, and also a show of respect for that one that was harvested. You know, by leaving part of yourself, some kind of gift behind. Because the Indian teaching is always, and I've heard this from so many of my teachers, about take from the earth what you need, but know that you also must give back. There's got to be an exchange, or your life is not going to be in a good way. I was traveling to Weaverville. Maybe some of you are from out of town, but there's a 4-lane from here to the little community of Weaverville, and there's a big grass median in the middle. I think it was a week ago yesterday, I'm traveling to Weaverville, and there's a bear that has been killed that's in the grassy median there between the 4 lanes. And I passed that big bear, and I went up and I made a U-turn. I come back, and right in front of me, a lady had pulled over. The bear had probably been killed probably an hour or 2 before. It's a big female, big sow. She was probably this big around and about this long, way too heavy for me to lift. And the lady got out of her car that was in front of me, and she starts taking pictures. And then a car stopped on the other side of the 4-lane, and a couple of young men got out with their cameras, and they're taking pictures of this dead bear. And the bear, its head is injured and it's lying in a puddle of blood. I'm not trying to be gross before lunchtime. This is something that happened. And people are taking pictures of this. And I thought that very much disrespectful of the life of this animal. And I went back to my car and I got some tobacco. And you may know of this as well, but the Indian people pray with tobacco. We don't necessarily smoke it. But I got some of that tobacco, and as I was sprinkling the tobacco around that bear, I started asking the spirits in the 4 directions to come and make sure the spirit of this animal went up to the sky world. I'd said no words, but as I was doing that, the people with their cameras saw something that they did not understand. So they put those cameras away. They got in their cars. They drove away. And I bring up that little personal story because I don't hold any ill will against those people that stopped. And what I perceived as disrespect in taking pictures of this dead animal. I don't blame them. I kind of hold it against their parents and their grandparents and their ancestors that failed to teach them about the respect of all things. My teaching has been that the animals, the flyers, the crawlers, the swimmers, all animals, and the plants, everything that lives and touches this Mother Earth was made by the same mystery, the same Spirit. And so in that way, we are all connected. And that's words I hear a lot. Young people say that. Oh man, we're all connected to one another. Those are nice words, but most people don't live that way. They don't really have that understanding of that interconnectedness of all things. When the Indian would take fruit from a tree, there was not usually any kind of sadness or ceremony, because you're not killing the tree when you pick that fruit. Or when you break a branch, a lower branch off of a tree for firewood, that's that rotted branch, that doesn't kill the tree. And when you take a grain or something, you save some grain so you can plant that in the spring. So like the corn that you keep and you dry and you replant in the spring. It's through the humans that grain flourishes. So you're giving back that way. You're not taking a life. But to take a life of an animal was very different. Because when you kill that animal for food, you take a life. That animal gave its ultimate sacrifice so you could live. So when a life of an animal was taken, there was ceremony and prayer. Sometimes the weapons the hunters would use would be cleaned and sterilized in a sweat lodge ceremony before they went out to hunt. And when that animal was killed, whether it was a rabbit or a squirrel or a deer or elk or whatever it was, there was always great sadness. And there was always a prayerful time when the hunter went to the place of that kill. The hunters today don't do that. Or not very many. An Iroquois friend of mine said his people, when they would go out to shoot the deer, they would also have ceremony. And where the animal was killed, a leg, a hind quarter or something was left in the forest for other animals. It was a way of giving back, not just taking. Some kind of gift was always left there. If your family was really hungry and you could not leave a gift of part of that animal behind, at least you would leave a gift of some kind behind. Sometimes the hunter maybe did not have anything personally to give, and his family was starving. In times like this, he would take the life of that animal, and in sadness, he would say a prayer. And an Iroquois friend of mine says, if nothing was available for that hunter to leave, he would take a piece of his own flesh and leave behind where that kill was made. Because the people, his people in those days, had such great respect. Because this animal had just given its life for your family to live. Talking to somebody outside, a story came, and I know you're hungry. I don't know if Robert wants me to, because Robert said, tell a short story. And I thought, okay, don't ever tell a storyteller to tell a short story, because we don't know short stories. We just get cranked up in about 45 minutes. But outside talking to a man, I realized I would share something personal that happened to me this summer. The last few summers I've been res hopping, going from reservation to reservation to the different First Nation people. This year I found myself in southern Minnesota at a place called Pipestone, where they had a Sundance there. A Sundance, it would take me hours to explain that, but a Sundance is a renewal ceremony, a very beautiful ceremony. But it's a very serious prayer as well. Some of you may know where the men get pierced through their chest and they get tied to a tree. And they stand tied to that tree for 4 days. No food, no water. It's very serious ceremony. And I'm there at Pipestone at that Sundance, and a man comes up to me. We were both helping keep fire for the ceremony. We're not being pierced, and we're not a sun dancer. But we were both helping out, and the man comes to me, and he said, he looked like he was maybe 60 years old. And I wish I could remember his name. It was a European name, like Schlumberger, Weinkauf, or something like that. Anyway, he said, this is my name, and he said, I'm German. And when my people came to this country, we married a Dakota Indian woman. So I am German and Dakota. And I'm not sure where he was going with his personal story, but I said, okay. He said, yeah, all my life, my parents, my grandparents, they told us how we came from the motherland, the old country, Germany, and how we were German, and now we were mixed with the Dakota people. And I was very proud because the German and the Dakota are very proud nations. So I was proud that I was Dakota and German. Then I saw an advertisement on television for Ancestry.com. You send us in a DNA sample, and we'll tell you who you are. We'll tell you where you're from. So he did that. And I asked him, I said, well, did you get the sample back yet? And he said, oh yeah, I got it. I said, well, what did it say? They told me that I was 0% German and 0% Dakota. All of my people came from northern Russia and Scandinavia up there. I said, wow, how did that make you feel? He said, you know, at first I was really, really empty inside. Really, really empty. And then, you know what I did? I got that piece of science and I threw that away because that is not who I am. I am German and I am Dakota and have been all of my life. And I will always be German and Dakota. I'm not telling you that to keep you from sending in your DNA sample. But that story, that man that told me, he was just telling me a little personal story. But as my travels, which were almost 2 months in the making as I traveled through the northern U.S. and Canada, I met many, many elders. I met a true medicine man, and there were very few medicine people left. But I met some elders and a medicine man, and all of these teachers that I kind of acquired on my journey. Probably the most powerful teacher was that man sharing that personal story. And I have now shared that with you. Sometimes I like to share personal stories at the beginning when I talk to people. And that way you have an idea of who you're listening to. You know, back to the story about the Indian that would pick fruit, but when an animal's life was taken, there was a lot of sadness around that because a life was taken. I think, ginseng's a little bit like that. And I'm sure that's why the Cherokee women, when they stepped over those first 3 plants and harvested that fourth, they always left a gift. Because you're kind of taking a life there when you take that plant. And there was always great reverence when life was taken. You've probably been told or read in histories or movies or books about the Old West or about Indian people and warriors, how they cut throats and dismembered people and all kind of evil, bad stuff. And I'm not saying that some of that did not take place, but I do know among my people, when the men would go on the warpath, and out of necessity, they would take a life. They did not just come back into the community and say, hey, celebrate me, I'm a great warrior. They were considered like unclean. They could not come back and associate with their people or their family until there was a period, and it was different with different families and with different communities. But usually it was at least 4 days, 7 days, sometimes a whole month. They would have to purify with the smoke, with prayer. They would go to water, or they would go in that sweat lodge. They would have to purify before coming back into their community and their family, because they were considered unclean because they had taken their life. Time to eat, Robert? Is it?
Yeah.
Okay, a short story then. And this will be very short. And this is kind of like a prayer. And I don't want to gross out any vegans or vegetarians here. Of course, Grandpa said vegetarian was an old Cherokee word for bad hunter. But I was at a ceremony in southern Missouri of mostly indigenous and mixed blood people. And there was a grandma there, an elder grandma, gray braided hair. She was part Kootenai, which are people up in Lake Idaho. She was part Kootenai and part Mayan. And this grandma was gifted this leg of a deer, fresh killed deer. And she was going to prepare that for stew that evening for supper. And she asked me if I would assist her, and it was actually an honor for that grandma to ask me to help her do this. And of course I said yes. We had like a card table, had a big white sheet of paper over it, and that deer, and she was telling me how to take the fibers apart of the muscle tissue and take out this little membrane to make the meat really soft. We were preparing this, and a young girl, maybe this tall, maybe 6 years old, I don't know, 6 or 7. Little girl comes up, and you've seen children wrinkle their noses before. She comes up and she looks at that leg of the deer and she wrinkles her nose. She said, "What's that?" And Grandma said, "Well, that's the leg of a deer." She looks at me and she said, "What's all over your hands?" And I said, "Well, that's blood from the animal." And she wrinkled her nose again and said, "I ain't gonna eat that." And she started to walk away, and the grandma came to her in a very gentle way, got her by the shoulders and squared her up so that they could see eye to eye. And the grandma said, "Young girl, the only way this animal can ever live again is through us. It's important tonight that you eat this stew." The little girl just shook her head. She walked away. But that evening at supper time, that little girl was the first one in line with her bowl. And in my people's understanding, that's a way of honoring the life of that animal. So with that prayer, I would say, thank you. My people say, "Wado, Wado."